Today's chat is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/FFC. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, this is a great alternative for keeping up with the monthly Focus Fire Book Club.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for the 19th installment of our Extra Lore series, recorded live on October 4th, 2017, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to the live chat here. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Our topic for this chat is going to be an introductory, I'm going to emphasize that one more time, introductory look into the DC universe. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Justin had to take the night off due to another change in his schedule. We're hoping that he's going to be able to flex everything out for this weekend, so be sure to send him some snack love over on Twitter at JustinSane0516. And Mel is actually in the middle of the whirlwind of preparation for, I believe it's SnafuCon out in, I think it's Las Vegas, I think. But she's in the middle of all that insanity, so be sure to let her know that we miss her over on Twitter at The Wind of the Stars. And then we also have our resident Gunter extraordinaire, Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I'm hoping you're ready for the shenanigans tonight. What are your thoughts?
Introduction. Like, seriously, guys. I listened to another podcast that talks about comic books, and they do 2-hour episodes on each character.
Man, only 2 hours?
Oh, God. Well, okay, they do a really brief... it's really
well,
good.
Emphasis on the... Oh, God.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I'm doing good. Excited, because actually my mom and sister are coming into town this weekend, and
nice.
So we're switching rooms. My office is going to be our bedroom this weekend, and they're going to stay in our nice big room on our nice big bed, and I'm going to have to sleep on a really small bed.
That sounds about right for family visiting.
But at least I'll be able to still be on the stream Friday night, so I'll be able to hang out with you guys and talk about the Traveler and the Light, and like, I'm excited about this weekend's episode. This episode I'm kind of excited about, but I've been mostly scared all day. All day.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
Introduction.
I love how all of us are like, introduction. So, of course, for these topics, we always want to make sure we have someone who is well-versed in the lore of what we're discussing. So with that being said, I want to welcome back one of our community managers, I can say that now, and a returning guest co-host, Damo. Damo, how's everything going for you tonight?
Fantastic and excited to be here.
How about letting people know where they can find you and just kind of like what got you into DC?
You can find me on Twitter at Damoel and definitely in the Focus Fire chat room. It was weird. I was always kind of a Batman animated style fan.
I'm surprised to hear that from you. I'm surprised to hear that from you, but I'm proud of you for admitting that.
I think that's a wonderful answer.
That is an amazing answer. No, don't get me wrong.
That's part of it.
That's an amazing answer.
That's the only thing I liked about DC, and I actually thought I hated the rest of it. And then I was kind of depressed in my mid-20s, and a friend of mine insisted that we go see Superman Returns, and it just changed my life. Like I was like, oh, I get it now. Okay, I see what this is about. And so it's been a love affair ever since then.
Nice.
I like it. Well, let's run through the intro real quick, and then we'll jump right into the introductory look at DC. Before we start off the chat, I do have a few housekeeping notes. In our last Extra Lore episode, we discussed the Final Fantasy series. If you missed that and have any interest in hearing our thoughts, please be sure to check out the new www.focusfirechat.com for archives of all previous chats, links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat out in the internet, and a growing collection of community articles. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. With the Extra Lore series, we delve into a game series other than Destiny for a full month, giving a group a chance to get a feel for the other games or content that our community loves to play. We try to stream a recap of this month-long conversation in the first week of each month. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, found at theguardiansofdestiny.com. These include Guardian Radio, the first and longest-running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, Ghost and Echoes, which also has the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, a non-Destiny-focused podcast, Paragon Radio. Our next Extra Lore is going to be a discussion on the lore of the Marvel Universe. So be sure to jump into the Discord server and weigh in on that conversation. With all that being said, Damo, where do you think the best place to start is when looking for a really, really basic understanding of the DC universe?
Well, we could start with how it was formed.
It's always a good place to start, the beginning.
Yeah, it started kind of in 1934 with a gentleman who got into the publishing business. And eventually sort of kind of floundered his way. He had some successes and some setbacks, but he eventually published Detective Comics, which was the origin for DC. Eventually that evolved into Adventure Comics, and then started to focus more on superheroes. I think it was like 1935 when Schuster and Siegel started working for them.
So it's been around. So DC, and I think we were kind of talking about this before the show too. DC and Marvel have both been around for what, close to 80 years now?
DC's a little bit older than 80, actually.
Okay. Oh yeah, good 34. That would be what, like, yeah. Okay, so yeah, 83, 84, yeah. So, but I mean, they're close. They're close to the same age.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's still kind of like, to me, it's just kind of like mind-boggling. It also explains why we've had like 50 bajillion retcons. It feels like.
Well, that also ties into like complicated elements that we probably won't get into, but a lot of political elements
right yeah.
Have also incentivized some of the rehashes and changes.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll let you get back. I'll step back into the corner and listen.
So from there, they went on to absorb a number of other comic publishers, which is actually where a lot of some of the favorites in DC come from. Captain Marvel, Batman originally, I think, started in a different place. No, he was Detective Comics. It was another one like that. Green Arrow is what I'm thinking of. Started in another comic place.
Green Arrow.
Oh man, don't you dare!
Before DC. Whatever, they're the same character.
They really are.
You sound like my wife.
They've definitely deviated in later years, but like they definitely started as basically the same character. I mean, rich playboy,
obviously one wears green
at night and runs out there and
one wears green and one wears black. Okay,
and throws sharp medieval objects at criminals for some bizarre reason instead of using a gun.
Because it's cool. All right. He's the new sexy Robin Hood, okay? It's
so
fine.
I do actually at least vaguely get the bow. There are elements to the bow that sort of make sense, but like, I'm going to take on that clown with a Tommy gun with my fists and a little bit of metal shaped like a bat.
Yeah.
Does not jive.
Okay, so DC Comics started as a actual set of comics, because comics were popular at the time, but they didn't have like superheroes, right?
Well, so some of them started with superheroes. I think Fawcett, the line that did Shazam / Captain Marvel / just Marvel, I think for a while. I don't know. I think they started in superheroes, but superheroes were not originally the big hit. It was definitely like war comics and detective comics and stuff like that. Cowboy was really big too. Westerns were huge. And then eventually, I think Superman might have been the first big one. Captain Marvel wasn't too far behind that though. But yeah, those sort of things eventually caught on and started going, gangbusters. So they definitely kind of moved permanently into that for a good long while. I mean, there was some minor stuff, but it wasn't until like the last 15 or 20 years we started seeing like semi-mainstream comic lines that aren't fiction or fantasy.
Yeah, and I just want to interject.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, sci-fi. Yeah, I just want to interject real quick. You made a really good point too, because you said the big thing when all these comics, or I guess were they comics or were they? Whoa, there was a different name for them. Why am I drawing a blank on? Anyways, these little novellas basically, they were the westerns and the war comics. But you also, and the reason why the war comics, I just kind of want to remind people, 1939, that's pretty close to a couple really big events going on in the world.
Yeah,
that had to do with war, and so that was kind of another thing. You have especially in America, you had a very big. I use this term in its diction term, not the connotation term. The propaganda machine kind of running there too. That was kind of justifying, what was happening and the collective response or not response of, the different cultures. So that's a historical, outside of the comic world, that's a big thing that was happening too. That, you have what is it? God, man, why do I always forget her name? The Riveter.
Rosie
the Riveter, and then like the Wonder Woman remake I have from Loot Crate. It's like
I have it too.
I love it. I love that one, but it's I mean, to me that's a really big deal too, because that's where like you get like, and we'll be talking about this next month, but like Captain America. That's kind of that was like the birth of those types of characters. So.
Well, a lot of and just in general, pop culture at the time, music even, it was all about escapism. So there's a lot of nonsense type songs that came out of that era just because people didn't want to think about the war. I mean, yes, there's going to be protest songs too, because there's always going to be that kind of thing during war times. But there was definitely a time where you had pop culture breaking out and just trying not to think about what's going on.
Well, and I mean, and to play off that too, you're also looking at, in 1934, 1939, you're in the midst of another really big thing that was going on, is the Great Depression. So your escapism was a huge proponent of that, because you're right, people wanted to get away, because, I mean, if you're not familiar with the Great Depression, I don't really know what to say to you, but go look it up. It was a very bad thing that happened, and a lot of things that, I mean, it was not a very pleasant time. So escapism makes perfect sense, and I mean, it was around until 1941, really. So it's just, to me, it's just the historical context of the birth, of all this escapism. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, but I don't want to. I will deviate into a history lesson, but I don't want to. So,
okay, so we have kind of the introduction of DC. When DC first started, how many different titles did it have? Because it was pretty small to begin with, right?
Well, I mean, when it started, it was just a book. It wasn't actually a publishing company. It wasn't until it was much later though that it became like, kind of started doing new new lines under the DC monogram. I don't remember exactly when that was.
Because I know All-Star Comics was what? All-Star Comics was 39. Hang on.
Yeah.
And then All-Star eventually got absorbed into DC.
Mm-hmm. I think
because All-Star was Superman, DC was Batman, which he wasn't actually Batman to begin with, right? He was just kind of like the detective.
Yeah, he was.
I don't remember exactly how he was introduced. But I do remember.
Oh, he was originally named the Batman hyphen. So, and I mean, he's always like, there's epithets such as Cape Crusader, Dark Knight, the world's greatest detective. You know, he was always, but it was always like his name always had Batman, but originally it wasn't one word; it was two. It was the Batman, and he was actually originally introduced in, you're right, Detective Comics number 27, actually in 1939. So he was, but I mean, he was definitely one of the more in the line of those detective comics, which again, you know, Damo, you said that's kind of where the DC kind of comes from. But yes, go for it.
We've mentioned the two big male predominant like poster children for DC. Wonder Woman doesn't come in until a little bit later.
Yeah, she's 41, I believe, right?
Around that time.
41 or 42.
For sure. But her introduction is completely different because she was written by a psychologist, right?
Yeah.
There's a video about her origin. I have not seen it. I don't know if is it out?
I don't know if it's out. I already knew the story, so I'm not really
right. I did not know the story. So does it look like it's pretty accurate to the story?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
about him. Is it Marston?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that's his. Or no, his pen name is Moulton. Yeah.
Right.
William Marston was the writer.
Yeah, there's some pretty intense stuff that he.
Yes.
It's like, there's a lot of adult themed things.
It is not a little light movie. Let's just put it that way.
No.
Fun fact: if you don't know this, he was actually the same psychologist with the inventor of the polygraph, and so the reason why she has a lasso of truth, it was kind of a way for him to advertise his own invention.
Well, and also. Yes, there's. I remember there being another reason for it too.
There is another reason.
Another non-little light reason.
Right. It's just that's the
but yes,
PC,
that's
PC
the PC version, and and that's why it's the lasso of truth, right? And I mean the rope aspect of it was definitely kind of. I always kind of took it as the if I remember, it was always kind of like. The other darker side, but like his emphasis on her being like really kind of the whole about truth, about justice, was kind of about that. I mean, yes, you're right, the polygraph, and then I think also was he the one that he was the one that drew a lot of inspiration from like Margaret Sanger.
So those are like the big three that are popular today. What other ones do you think, Damo? What other characters should we dive into a little bit? Because
Flash.
Oh.
Yeah, Flash is definitely a fairly central part of the DC collected universe. He's often depicted as kind of the heart of the Justice League. In fact, I mean, there's a direct storyline in the Justice League animated show where there's like an alternate timeline where Barry dies and the Justice League like loses its way and goes full dictatorship.
And
then tries to come to our Earth and does not succeed.
Does it? Isn't Barry the one who ends up being kind of the heartbreaker in Darkest Night, Brightest Day?
A bit. Yeah, the Justice Lords, as somebody in chat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, well, and let's take a step back real quick, because the other thing is, and Marvel does this as well, so this is not by any means, something that should shock most people in today's world. But like DC has what's generally called a multiverse, right?
Yeah.
It's a multi-dimensional reality. Damoel, do you want to talk about that a little? Because you just made the comment, right, about like Flash died in one world, and their Justice League became the Justice Lords, and then tried to come into our world. So how does that work?
There's I don't remember exactly how it ended up, but like they've gone through a couple different like shrinking, growing of their own universe. And if I remember correctly, that there's 52 canonical universes that kind of are in parallel. And there's sometimes subtle things between them that are different, and then sometimes it's huge, right? Like,
yeah, Bizarro.
I'm not sure if the Bizarro is a proper one anymore, but like there's one where like Lex Luthor is a hero because all like Superman is a tyrannical dictator, right? And so like it's kind of the reverse, where like Lex Luthor is, and the Joker and some other people are all the plucky, low-powered people fighting against the tyrannical regime.
Well, it's a way for writers to be able to write whatever they want with their characters and not have to worry about retconning everything.
Exactly, and it's a great way to write about characters in a way that like changes that character's fundamental aspects, but not for real. Right? Like, so you can write a Superman story like Red Sun, which is not its own proper universe, but in that one, baby Kal-El is found by the Russians and raised as a diehard communist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still the same person, just with a very different upbringing
and perspective.
Yeah.
So you have Barry Allen was the original Flash, right?
Jay Garrick was actually the original.
Garrett. Okay. So
and then he was retired, and they brought it completely, I believe, and then they brought the line back.
And they did that with a few different characters, because Green Lantern did that a lot.
Let me finish the Flash one, because that's even way more complicated.
Yeah.
Because they did Barry, and then they eventually brought Jay Garrick back and brought him into the Justice Society of America, which is one of my favorite titles of all time. And there was a lot of really cool things with that. The Green Lantern is actually super confusing, because the original person to bear the name Green Lantern is no longer at all related to everything that came out of it, right? He's a whole different hero with a whole different power set. I don't even know if he still goes by Green Lantern. Alan Scott is the character's name. I don't know if he picked up a new name with his new origins and stuff, but
I don't think so. He still had the lantern though, and he wasn't he a train guy?
No, he's now he's like in protector of nature, basically. I think he's part of the Green that Ivy is also
Swamp
part
Thing?
of. Yeah, and Swamp Thing, if I remember correctly.
Why do you think that DC does that, where they kill off an actual character? Because I mean, we have Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman who have stayed the same time, but even though they may have like costume changes or hair color changes,
well, I mean, Superman died, kind of.
Well, yeah, so did Batman, supposedly.
Well, Batman's were all faked. Superman's was at least kind of a weird hand-wavy thing. Like, he was legitimately dead.
Then you had What's-His-Face take over for Batman for...
Yeah, Batman has had a bunch of fake deaths and things like that. Some of the better storylines, in my opinion, are some of that. Because watching the Bat family fight about what the Bat family should mean is a very cool thing when it's well written.
Right.
But yeah, I think so. I mean, it's easy to think that comics have been popular forever, but it's not really that true. They've kind of dipped in and out of popularity, particularly superheroes have fallen in and out of favor for many different reasons. But I think one reason why you see a lot of reincarnations is because people would basically reset their line in order to reinvigorate it after a break. And so, like, oh, the Jay Garrick, thing isn't working, so let's try something new and completely rewrite the thing and just use the same name to kind of get people to look at it.
Mm-hmm. It's just been interesting to watch the evolution of how they write, or of the writers, because writers are constantly changing over there in both Marvel and DC. First time I ever picked up a comic, I was in high school, and I was working at Hastings at the time when Hastings was still a thing and not bankrupt.
Oh man, Hastings! I loved Hastings.
I did too. I hated my job there because I had to clean the toy aisle the whole time. But
I'm so sorry for all the trouble that I caused you.
That, and people don't alphabetize, which is hilarious. I still have that problem with today. If I see something out of order, alphabetized, like not right, I fix it for them.
Green has OCD, confirmed.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. Not diagnosed. I'm not that bad. But my first comic I ever picked up, I believe, was a Superboy or Supergirl. Yeah, it was a Superboy comic. So we talked about like the Bad Family a tiny bit. The Super Family is kind of funky and odd, and
I don't know what you're talking about. Power Girl is totally awesome.
But the dog.
Oh God, I forgot about the dog.
Crypto. Crypto is awesome.
It's like DC goes through very, very weird phases where it wants to go like, hey, let's make it super family friendly. There's a guy and a dog and a girl and everybody can be a Superman. And then there's times where Batman is scary and everybody's dying. And
I love how she picks Batman to be the because there's times I think yeah.
Don't forget Supergirl had a cat too.
Yeah. I forgot about and then even the okay, so Superman's like super happy, friendly, funny most of the time, right? Not super dark. Batman is scary. Like, he's the most intimidating DC character I think that's out there, because just
the best thing about Batman is that he literally has a cabinet full of ways to take out not only his enemies but his friends. What was the arc where that got compromised? That was
Tower of Babel.
Yeah. Everyone's like, wait, you have a what?
The comic is actually less good than the animated version.
Oh my gosh, the animated
Really?
version of that. Oh, it's hilarious.
The animated version is very good. I wasn't a big fan of the comic. It had some good elements, but like,
I just loved like the little clips about like how like I think it was Wonder Woman's like looking at Batman like, are you serious? Like, you have all this? Well, yeah. Why else? What do you think?
Yeah,
Batman's reactions are just amazing in that.
Yeah. It's just, okay, so like we talked about a tiny bit about how it dives in and out of being super dark, super light.
Yeah.
The ages of comics. When did we officially start calling them Silver Age, Gold Age? I don't even know what age we're in currently.
There's really just Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age. And after that, like, opinions differ. There's different schools of thought on how the newer ages are. But Golden Age is the early stuff when things were changing pretty much daily. Superman would have a new power every week. Things like that. Things weren't canon. They would completely shift. And then Silver Age started like kind of solidifying things a bit more. There was still definitely like retcons, but like things were a little bit more consistent in between them. And then Bronze Age, or Modern Age is another word for it, we're pretty much kind of what we're still in, where comics.
Is that like the Crisis and the Infinite Earth?
It's kind of around
Infinite
there.
Crisis and 52 and Rebirth. Rebirth is what's currently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, when did... Okay, so there was we talked about it in chat. What was the act that Congress did to try to... Oh gosh, it was the comics. There was the Comics Alliance, but there was also the act that kind of put a ban on anything that could be
Oh yeah.
influential.
So like you're talking about like the political
Right.
Yeah. Comics Code, I think it was called.
That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah.
Like that happened during the Silver Age. Like they had that all through the Silver Age, and then towards the end of the Silver Age, most of the comic publishers and stuff like that decided to kind of get push away from it. It seems, and
well, it wasn't even. It was well into the Bronze or Modern Age that changed. Actually, like it wasn't until like because comics have been going for that. I mean, you could maybe argue that that's where the Modern Age started, but yeah, it was. I think it was later into it.
Well, like we had a bunch of comics like Vertigo and stuff like that were still breaking out that would just have to have the warning on their comics. But it didn't seem like most of the major publishers decided to jump on board with that until like late 70s, early 80s.
I would say 80s, more in the 80s.
Are we still? And when you're talking about that, you said it was the Comics Code.
Yeah,
the Comics Code Authority,
Alliance,
or Comics Code Authority, the CCA.
Yeah.
So that was I'm just looking real quick. It was formed in 1954.
Yeah.
So that's Silver Age for sure.
Yeah, because I don't think Bronze. I think technically, and I know Damo, you kind of made a comment. It's kind of depends on who you talk to, but I think it's like 70s or 80s. Bronze kind of started.
Is where Modern started. Bronze, Modern.
Or sorry.
I mean, it works either way, but
so
yeah. Oh God.
But I guess they've moved. The reason why I wasn't really familiar with it, I didn't really remember this, but it's not really in effect anymore, right?
No.
Because like, wasn't it back in like 2000 that, or Marvel abandoned it in 2000?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2011, the rest of them had already. Archie and DC were the last ones to break with the CCA. So there you go, DC. You're in good company.
Well, it was more that they decided they wanted to police themselves and that they didn't need some overarching body to do so.
I'm not
going to follow that down that road because there's so many things I could say.
I mean, an easy way to think of it is think of it kind of like the ratings on movies and how it was super, super strict to begin with. And now things are getting more and more loose as we kind of tumble down this road.
Well, there's Potato in chat actually has a really good question while we're kind of talking about this screening. I don't know, like monitoring themselves. Yeah, he's asking, when did we start seeing the romance between some of the heroes? Like, it's not a new thing for us right now, right? It's always kind of been there, or it seems like it's always been there, but, you know...
It kind of depends on how deep you assume the romance, or think the romance is. Because, I mean, Clark and Lois have been together since, I want it, like, early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Clark, I mean, they were kind of a package deal, right?
Yeah.
I don't
well,
remember.
I mean, I don't think she was around at the very beginning, but as long as Superman's had a love interest, it's pretty much been her.
Oh, okay. And then,
except for that one weird time that Superman and Wonder Woman had a thing.
No,
that was a terrible idea, and that did not happen.
That happened in exactly one character, one publication where.
And everybody threw a fit.
And everyone agreed. Everyone agreed that it was the worst idea ever.
Even Batman and Wonder Woman, I thought, was a bad idea.
No, that actually kind of makes sense.
You bite your god tongue.
No.
Absolutely needs somebody who can call him on his business.
He does, but it doesn't need to be Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor.
No,
I will always be a Steve Trevor fan.
Steve, I'm so boring. I put my own woman to sleep, Trevor.
No, see, you're just losing the charm. You're losing the charm of it. I don't need some brooding bat, fleshy
but
man.
in the storylines, in the storylines where they're together, he's not brooding because that Batman would never get with anybody
because she would call him on it, and she wouldn't slap him because it would kill him.
It's the good Batman storylines where it's not brooding so much as stoic, right? I mean, that's the difference between like some of the aspects of Batman is like he isn't actually that brooding. He's just very disconnected and stoic.
Yeah.
Well, and if you the thing about Batman too, you know, and Damo, you and I have had this long conversation before, but like if you ever get a chance, one of the really cool things to do is Batman actually has books, like they're actual chapter books, and if you get a chance, read one, because I don't know what it is, but the fact that it's not a comic, it's all in text, and they actually like do a really amazing job of kind of showing the way he sees the world. Mm-hmm. And so like he's brilliant, but he's also like I can't remember if he technically has photographic memory, but his analytical mind, like the way he like runs through things, it makes perfect sense then when you kind of go back to the comic and you see him kind of like not being like cuddly, like not really cuddly, but like he's not really like, he doesn't speak a lot. It makes sense because that's kind of the way he interacts with his entire world, is he's always analyzing stuff. I read I can't remember what it is. It's not The Dark Knight. It's
Batman is a modern take on Sherlock Holmes, but with
cranked up to 11.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the
without
detective aspect
without the
of it.
copious drug usage.
Or the Benedict Cumberbatch.
Well, okay, fair
voice.
enough, Damo. Fair enough.
Is an unhealthy addiction to fighting crime really that different from a drug addiction when you get down to it?
It is an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a time that he drank a lot? Like there was a run.
There's a couple of weird storylines where stuff like that has happened.
Yeah, it depends on who's writing him. It depends on who's writing him.
The only one that I even vaguely found compelling and felt like it actually would work is After Death in the Family.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's such a sad story.
Yeah, which was but that's the only time where he kind of lost control.
Was that one before Red Hood? Or is that
That is
Red Hood?
that is
the Red Hood. Okay, yeah,
that's where Red Hood came about much later, when DC was like, maybe it was dumb to throw a character away based on a phone poll.
God,
yeah.
no.
Maybe this guy had fans. I don't know. Let's go do some more blow.
Just explain that real quick to the people at home who don't know.
So there was one of the better Robins, in my opinion, was the second Robin, and he was kind of not the most popular, and so DC decided that they would do a poll to see whether people would prefer his character to live or die. Basically at the back of the book there was a phone number. You called in, you paid your $2 fee, and you voted for whether you wanted him to live or die. But it was very stacked. There were a lot of people who didn't like the character and did have money to spend, so they stuffed the out of that ballot box and it was destroyed him.
That was so brutal.
And if you actually want to see the best version of his story, there is an animated film called Batman and the Red Hood, which is, I will point out, well, let me check my source here real quick.
It should be on Netflix.
I believe, yeah, okay. It's still at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is still
really.
It is still at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So.
Wow. I know Jensen Ackles does Red Hood.
He does, and he's pretty fantastic.
He does amazing with it. But yeah, that's where some of the hatred for Joker kind of really gets solidified.
It's actually a much better story to make the Joker look like a villain than many of the other ones.
Yeah, I would agree.
Dick Grayson is a great Robin, but I think that the best way they've told the Dick Grayson story is Dick Grayson moving away from that life and into being his own person. So I can't say that he's the best Robin.
Is Dick Grayson the one who turns into Nightwing?
Yeah.
The best patootie in DC.
Yeah. Yeah, for
also,
sure.
I love biggest...
that. Tasty fiddles there.
Also, he's the biggest utter playboy in the entire DC universe.
Well, kind of.
Yeah. Well, he sleeps around. He sleeps around.
Well,
no,
he doesn't. I mean, have you seen him walk away? Can you really blame him?
He doesn't actually. There's been relatively few people in the Dick Grayson cave, as it were.
I love the like. How can I say this? How can I say this?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a disservice to call him a Robin because best Robin because his whole point in storyline is to move beyond that.
He was one of the Robins that actually survived Robin Hood.
No, I mean the only one that has died officially and canonically is
who was
Jason Todd.
Jason
is the
Todd,
only one who has died. The other ones are all still alive, as far as I know.
Well, but are they still even around? Like, because I mean, Dick Grayson is the only one that I mean, like him and Jason Todd.
Tim Drake is still. I think Tim Drake is with Teen Titans.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. Okay.
And is Red Robin. Jason Todd is actually not dead. He just, he got better. And he is under the moniker Red Hood, which is actually Joker, one of Joker's canon origin, sort of, maybe, probably.
Maybe, possibly.
Well,
not
I mean,
sure. Crazy man.
When you talk about Joker's origin, it's one of those ones that's best served when it's not well illustrated, where like we don't know.
As the terrible TV show Gotham has definitely pointed out.
Okay, so can we talk about the most ridiculous retconning type mechanics?
It makes sense, kind of.
The Lazarus Pit that brings everybody back.
I mean, that's okay. No, you can't call that retconning, like, because it is a story mechanic.
It's not a retcon.
But it's been around for longer than many of the characters it's brought back. Like that's
I wouldn't call it a retcon.
That's like
it's more of a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah,
like
it's not even that because it's not often used, right? I mean, there aren't actually that many characters who have used that technology to return, like,
and all of them who have are seriously like. I mean,
most of them are very damaged people.
I don't have a problem with DC having the Lazarus Pits simply because they do a really good job of balancing it. Like, they don't use it often. And when they do use it, the one that I'm intimately familiar with is Red Hood. They go insane. Yeah. Like, I mean,
it took him many years to get himself chained back together, so to speak.
Well, who all has used it besides what's his face?
Mostly, it's just Raish and Jason Todd.
Raish is his own bundle of insanity.
And I mean, Raish only does it for Jason Todd. Like, his daughters don't even do it most of the time. Like, he only did it for Jason Todd because he felt entirely complicit in his death and didn't.
Which he should.
He should, but he respects Batman so much he could not have that. He didn't want that on his conscience, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So he brought Jason Todd back in order to.
Speaking of Talia.
No, please don't. Unless you want this to get real uncivil real quick. Thou shalt not mention.
I like her. I like her character.
Well, we're done here.
And
we're done here.
And to
All right,
be
it was a
even
good show,
more.
Blue. It was fun being part of the FFC crew, but I have to leave you here. I
And
cannot abide a
top
Talia
it-
lover.
I don't. Okay, I didn't say I love her. I like her.
So which part do you like her? The part where she sexually assaulted Batman in order to get a child off of him?
I like
One of the 6 billion times she pledged to love Batman and within 5 minutes turned him over to Daddy Dearest?
I like how she's a broken character, okay? I like how in most of the DC, you don't get broken characters. You don't get well done broken characters. And she is as broken as you get. And she still has a love story with Batman.
Well done part.
And almost is a better match for Batman than a lot of them, even though she tries to trick him into marrying her.
And literally sexually assaults him to get pregnant.
Yeah, that was
There's
a
a lot
really
of-
weird.
there's a
That
lot
was a
of- yeah.
weird. That was a weird story arc too.
There's
I
only,
just love.
like, if you're
I
gonna
love
argue that
how
there's
like
somebody-
we now know
It's
how
been
to
kind of
trigger
rang
him.
on.
We know how to trigger Damo so well now. Like
Oh, I
it's
hate
either
her so much. There are
sword
no
logic,
words.
sword logic, Toland,
No.
Talia.
No. Sword logic combined with Toland, combined with hating on Mara for 6 hours, doesn't even begin to touch how much I hate Talia.
That's awesome. That makes me so happy.
I like the
that I found
Padishah
that.
Emperor more than I like freaking Talia.
Oh, dang.
Shots fired.
Okay,
Like,
so
I would back that guy. And if
there-
I had to pick between the two to rule this universe, I would give it to that crazy man.
is there a character that you dislike in the DC universe more than her?
Oh no, it's not even possible.
How interesting.
I would sell.
Not even
I would
Joker?
sell cookies. I would sell. I'm more scared of Joker for sure. I would
Well,
sell
yeah,
cookies for
that's true.
Darkseid before I would even like. Before I would even like dump a bucket of waste on Talia in order to put her and my favorite character in DC out. Like I like his soups, but I'd let you burn.
Not even Guy Gardner. I agree with Ghost on this one. Not even Guy
Man,
Gardner.
I would go
He
get
was
a beer with
jerk.
Guy Gardner before I would
Guy
even punch
is
Talia.
such a
I hate
jerk.
Guy. Ghost knows how much I hate Guy.
He's such
That's
a
why
jerk.
he's bringing him up.
It's like so I get the fact that she is like messed up beyond belief.
Just the fact that she throws him under the bus every single time Daddy snaps his
That's-
fingers.
That's the point. That's
No,
the whole
that is
point
not
of
the
her
point.
character. That's the point of her character, though.
Then stop falling in love with him or do something. Quit.
Okay, it's
Go-
Batman. Batman has a problem falling in love with them too, though.
No, he really doesn't.
Oh, he
Him and
does.
Selena,
Well,
him and
though that
Selena are fine.
but like yeah, there's that was the entire issue with what was it? Is it Damien? Like that's kind of what happened. Is he kind of stopped falling in
And
love,
there's
with-
actually
and then
a
that
universe-
happened.
And there is actually a universe. Well, fair enough. And there's actually a universe in which Damien is a good character too.
Yeah, because
In the movies, in the animated movies, Damien is actually a pretty awesome character.
right. I think that was the. Is that the one where he's Robin?
Mhm.
Okay.
And then now he's part of the Teen Titans. And
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They do a good job of making him so he's still the same character, but because they don't have to fill as much time with him, I think it's very easy to make him that weird dichotomy between being like very, very cocky and arrogant, but also sort of likable. Because like you don't have to flip back and forth as much, right? Like one good flip is pretty all right.
And just
thing that
for people who are still dying laughing over Damo's triggering, Damien is the offspring.
Of the sexual assault that I was
Yeah.
mentioning earlier.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's so
And
Talia is Damien's mother and Bruce is Damien's father.
Which wasn't Damien raised with Talia for a while?
Raised with Talia and her crazy father, yeah, until she like in the movies I'm not familiar with the comics and I hate Damien in the comics because he's completely unlikable, so I don't pardon me. In the movies, Raish gets wrecked and Talia can't get revenge and take care of her son at the same time. So of course, like the loveless, horrifying she-harpy that she is, she unloads her kid on somebody who's never met him, and has a pretty active lifestyle.
You know what I think about that, though? I mean, as terrible as it is, I think in some ways it is a really
And if
good.
Talia was a human being, I would agree with you, but she's
No, no, no.
not.
Well,
But the thing, what I'm going is
I
that
know.
this is an example of something that you see in real life. Like there are people out there who will dump their kid off, and so it's relatable.
Yeah,
Right,
it is
and
to some
just-
extent, and
just-
she doubles down on it too, and
Yeah, she
treats
does.
Damien very poorly later on.
Just to clarify too, I think it was Morrison that wrote that entire thing, right? Wasn't it?
That would
Grant?
not surprise me.
I believe it was, yeah.
Because I think I'm looking at a note here from Morrison. He said that he messed up a lot of the details, and one of those details is exactly what you're talking about, Damo, is Talia drugging Batman before
Oh yeah,
the whole thing. So that was actually retconned by, I believe it was Tomasai, Peter Tomasai,
Yeah.
with Robin Rises Omega.
Yeah.
So that little piece was retconned for anyone who's worried about Batman's well-being.
Well, but it's kind of
But it's still
it's retconned how severe it was, but it's been retconned.
Right. I mean, I'm just saying.
Retconned as to like how, yeah.
It was, yeah. And as far as Batman's other love interest of being Catwoman, I honestly think Catwoman is the best love interest for Batman. I don't care if you disagree with me.
I actually I like
Selena Kyle and Batman.
I like Wonder Woman and Batman because I do think that Bruce, like, with the way DC writes him, particularly, Bruce needs someone to call him on his crap, right?
Which
and, like,
Selena does. Come on.
In some storylines, it's just she's less. I agree 100% that when she's written well, she's probably the best match. It's just like she's written poor a lot, like catastrophically a lot. So that's one of the reasons. Like it's meta things that make me kind of dispute it. But when she's written well, like I think she's hands down the best because she does great things to call him on his crap and she knows when to let him do his crap and then kind of indulge his crap.
Right. Whereas Wonder Woman can be, she's pretty naive for a lot of things. She's gotten better over the years, but she's not as good at calling him on, she's good at calling him on things, but she's not good at letting him make mistakes. Yeah,
well, and also sometimes, just to do what he needs to do instead of being called on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will also say that in any situation in which the relationship is something that actual human beings would have, which is not, I'm not trying to say that derogatorily towards comics relationships, but that's not often what we want. Realistically, we want fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime that they are written in the way that two real human beings would interact, I think that they're perfect for each other because they're broken in such perfect ways that they just fit directly together.
Right. They're very symmetrical.
Because Batman is broken in that you can fairly seriously argue that there is no Bruce Wayne doesn't exist, right? Bruce Wayne died X number of years ago in an alley with his parents.
Bruce Wayne is the mask that Batman puts on.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And I think that to some extent, Selina raises Bruce from the dead and gives him a second lease at life.
And depending on who writes Selina and what background they're going with at this time, she is kind of the similar story because there was one set where she was orphaned as well.
Yeah, well, and there's that.
Well, yeah, no, she's had a terrible background too, but she was broken in the opposite direction, right? She feels no responsibility and no bond to humanity and no belief in people, and Bruce, and I'm saying Bruce there specifically, despite what I just said, gives that back to her.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He turns her from a thief into mostly an anti-hero and arguably a full-on hero in a number of situations.
Right. I agree with that.
And
I will actually point out a kind of divisive storyline that I really have enjoyed a bunch of, which is Injustice, and I think that's some of Selena's best writing, actually, because that's very, very what I think she sees in him. And what she does for him is very well expressed there. Because I think Dick Grayson dies, and like the way she reacts to that is everything Bruce needed in that situation. And I think
a lot of people gravitate towards the Wonder Woman Batman pairing simply because it's a very easy to see opposites, right? You know, Wonder Woman forces Bruce Wayne or forces Batman to not be as dark, and Batman kind of does he not as much, but he kind of grounds her idealism a little bit. You know, they do kind of similar what you're saying is being done with the Catwoman thing, but it's more of it makes, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but Wonder Woman kind of makes him a better person, and he kind of makes her more realistic. Like, you know, but the point with Wonder Woman is, and Green, you kind of made this comment too, is like her naivete of what exactly is going on in the world. You know, Bruce has got that in spades, and, and whereas the idealism that she kind of forces him to follow, because when she does call him on, you know, she prevents him from going too far, and the thing about Wonder Woman is she's kind of got the strength to back up her, you know, she can bend him in half.
Yeah, she's stronger than him by a long ways, but
we know that. I mean, in any conversation which matters, that doesn't matter.
right. No. And I agree. But what I mean is, like, in a situation, because, well, I mean, just Batman's character is like, you know, there's only so much you can tell him, and then. But he's actually, I'm just going to say that
Selina does too, right?
Selina's
one of the only people that Batman has taught to fight. If that's still part of the canon,
I don't remember if it is or not.
I know him teaching Superman to fight. Finally, is still part of the canon.
As far as, like, Wonder Woman...
Actually, I want to address one thing before it goes too far past. I will disagree a little bit with Black Flag. He said that Clark and Bruce are the masks. I think it's more complicated with Superman. I think you're right that Clark is a mask, but it's different because it's what Clark wants to be, and wants to be possible for the world. Clark is very complicated. With Batman, there's arguably just Batman. You can argue that there's also, like, Bruce Wayne, which is just a false personality, and then, you know, the broken child that's still sitting in that alley. That's another way to view it, and a bit more complicated.
The thing is that when Batman goes out, he is still thinking as Batman. When Clark goes out, he can actually put down everything and not be constantly calculating.
Yep, and there's kind of four elements to Superman. There's Superman himself, which, you know, the world sees and what he puts on to show the world. There's Clark Kent, the person he wants to be and like he wants to build the world for. Kal-El, you know, the broken child that lost his parents, and you know, kind of the other aspect of Kal-El is the last legacy of Krypton, right? The Krypton's living obituary, so to speak, right? So there's the kind of the big four aspects that inform his personality. So he's a very complicated part.
Right. And I think going off that too, I think the point with Batman is exactly what you kind of said, is Superman has a different basic response to they both have similar tragedies. I mean, Superman's is magnified significantly because he didn't just lose his parents, he lost his entire pretty much species.
But also different because he didn't watch it.
He didn't watch it. Right. He didn't watch it.
He also didn't, he wasn't raised knowing that.
What? Yeah,
because he doesn't know that till.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Because he didn't know that until his teacher. But I mean, the other thing is that you see a dynamic there, because I mean, and it that is a very important distinction too. Is that, you know, Superman didn't experience it. Batman, Bruce watched the whole thing happen, and that's, you know, talking about the psychology of it, that you can see that repercussions, those fragmented aspects of his character, you know, even today. That's an inherently very, very, very crucial part of his being. In the same way, though, Superman's loss is also inherently very powerful, but it's a different type of repercussions, right? Like he's doing things in a hopeful memory, whereas Batman's doing things in kind of a vengeful memory. He's wanting to hold up to that kind of hero mentality, which is you go into the whole thing with like not killing and everything of that nature. So he has the code that he forces himself to hold himself to, but like there's nothing there. Whereas Superman is, it's kind of like, and Damo, you kind of said this as well. Superman is building something. Batman is trying to kind of tear apart the things that he sees wrong.
I just disagree. Batman is trying to build something. He just doesn't believe it can be built.
Fair enough.
Because one of my absolute favorite lines is actually from Young Justice, which is one of my favorite animated things and probably one of the best things DC's ever done. There's a great exchange where they're talking about inducting Roy Harper into the Justice League, and they get into an argument about his age, and Diana like lashes out at Bruce and says, "Oh, you're so fair and balanced on this because you brought Robin into the crime fighting at the ripe old age of 13." And Batman just kind of looks at her and says, "Well, he needed to find justice for his parents." And she's like, "So he could turn out like you?" And he like stares her down and says, "No, so that he wouldn't."
Yeah.
Yeah. Weren't most of the Robins at the age of 13?
Around that age, young teenagers. I think Jason Todd was a bit earlier, but yeah, I mean they're all fairly young. But Batman doesn't believe that he can build the world that he wants to, but he's still going to anyway because he can't see another path forward. Right.
Right.
Which also explains kind of his frustration and his like pessimism, is because he's constantly got a Sisyphean project in front of him, and he's willingly going at it.
Explains how, when he's well written, the transitions that happen in his character, because as the Bat family grows, I think that he realizes more and more that he actually can. He just can't do it himself.
Right. Which is a huge thing for him. As a character, like that's a huge thing, because once he realizes that, then I think that's when you really see his character shine.
Well, and I think that Dick showed him that by walking away. Actually,
I can see that argument.
Because I think that it's kind of a weird thing. Like if you think about and kind of investigate and look at how that all played out, like, Batman's not usually the type to just sort of let that happen. And so I think that he kind of realized that maybe it was a good thing.
So what about the rest of the Justice League? We've hit the Trinity pretty hard. But what about Cyborg, or depending
Cyborg's kind of a new thing.
Right. Like, when did he come about? Because I don't even...
He was originally a Teen Titan, and I think in New 52 they moved him over to the formal Justice League role.
Right, that was my first exposure to him, was in Teen Titan.
And so, yeah, I think that's where... I think in New 52 they moved him over to being an official Justice League member.
Yeah, and we also have Aquaman, Jason Momoa.
Oh gosh. Okay, so
so much better as Jason Momoa.
I know. Yeah. It's amazing.
I really want to like that character, but I just can't take him serious, even as Jason Momoa.
I think that if you watch the Justice League animated show, or probably just the movies, you'll change your mind. But he's actually a fairly bad character. That stupid frickin' Super Friends thing did a great disservice to him.
Yeah, it did, because that's my only exposure. And for me, it's just like,
guys!
What was the movie? What was the movie, like A Fish Called Wanda? That's what it reminds me of. It's just
yeah.
Why? Why would you do? I mean, yeah, it could theoretically be really cool to be able to call sea creatures, but
I mean, he does a lot more than that. That's just one of the elements they screwed up on that show.
Yeah. So okay, so Aquaman and Cyborg. Who else?
Hawkman.
Martian Manhunter is in and out. He's one of my favorite members of the Justice League, and one of the few that was also really active in the Justice Society, which was the precursor.
Right.
Both fictionally and real in the real world to the Justice League.
We got Superman, Aquaman, Flash, Green Lantern.
Green Lantern. There's several good Green Lanterns that have served on the Justice League. There's
also several bad Green Lanterns.
No, there's only the good ones, really. It's just Hal Jordan, which is kind of crappy, but he does the work. There's Jon Stewart, who is in and out of being good and bad. I think depending on who's writing him, he's great in the animated show, and he's pretty awesome. And then there's my boy Kyle Rayner, who's fantastic. That's all of the Green Lanterns. That's
Kyle could
it's the whole list.
Okay, now we're gonna fight. I wanted Kyle to be so good. I wanted him to be so good, and just not quite there.
I mean, so you got to remember, I pick and choose what I like in comics. I don't adhere to the strict canon. So like, the Kyle Rayner his highs are very good, and that's why I love it.
Yeah, I get that. It's just there's some really talk about some messed up stuff that happens to one of those characters. Is the
that's
worst.
Green Lantern special. I mean, like I used to love Hal Jordan to death, but like everything they've done with him for the past 30 years is just run that character right the heck into the ground.
The fact that his girlfriend was in the fridge and dead—that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's terrible. Like the things that have happened to Babs, that's bad, but the fact that somebody chopped up his girlfriend and put it in the fridge is just disgusting.
Yeah, but that's one of the most reviled elements of comic history. I mean, like, you really can't compare that to, like, standard stuff, right? Like,
kind of like the whole Talia thing?
No, because Talia does it over and over and over. It's Talia's character. It's literally what she does. They don't even refer to her by character in the offices anymore. They're just like, who's that crazy chick who screws over Batman every time? Yeah, just put her in the book. Like, she's a freaking meme at this point. She's not even a character.
Instant trigger.
Yes, I'm enjoying this. I am playing with a new toy.
Yeah, because they're rare, right? With me, there's so few ways to get the Damo agitated and screaming.
Okay, we have Green Lanterns. Do we want to talk?
Dr. Fate's another alumni from the JSA that's in
true.
The Justice League, and he's one of my favorite characters.
Zatanna's
less a member. She's in and out, but like she's not as much as
Dr. Fate's daughter, right?
No, Young Justice, but nowhere else.
Okay, as far as Zatanna, and DC does a really terrible job, I think, handling magic.
Really?
I
love DC's magic system more than anything else, honestly.
I think they're just so afraid to use it.
Well, they were for a long time because the Comics Code subtly and surreptitiously
told them they couldn't.
Right.
Basically it was directly sort of like, maybe don't do this.
Don't do this. You saw that
like
strange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because like basically anything that could double back around to like demonology, I'm gonna get there in a second, guys, was very verboten. But I think that since then DC has developed one of the better systems, because as Ghost mentioned in chat, the Lords of Order and Chaos are very neat because they're heroes and villains in ways that you wouldn't think, because it's not good and evil. It's not
right.
Order isn't good. Order isn't good. Chaos isn't evil.
Okay. Who as far as Zatanna, who else is in the DC universe? Magic. I know
Constantine.
Recently.
Constantine.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Constantine's Vertigo. He's
amazing.
Constantine is really solid. I actually highly recommend that you check out the TV show.
Yes.
Doesn't he have his
not
own
the movie.
house? Like
He does, the House of Mystery. The movie's actually all right. It's just not very Constantine-y.
Yeah,
it's
just
it's an all right movie. It's just not Constantine.
It's not Constantine.
But the TV show is in the situation where like people watching it on Netflix and stuff is potentially going to do something, right?
I know. I'm so excited.
They like the actor. They like the project. So and they have their own digital distribution network coming out soon, premiering with Young Justice and the Teen Titans live action. So, go watch that show.
Is he actually blonde in the show, like he's supposed to be?
He is. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
The actor is fantastic.
Yeah, the actor.
Matt,
Matt,
is 100% fantastic. Something.
He does an amazing job. He actually has a couple times shown up in the Arrowverse.
Right.
He has. Jason Blood is sort of magic now that we're away from the comics code. Jason Blood's one of the cooler characters. He's a former knight of Merlin who, Merlin, literally bound to a demon so that he could kind of keep trekking through the ages and fighting evil. So he's kind of a weird character.
Matt Ryan. Yeah, Matt Ryan was the actor for Constantine.
Yeah, Matt Ryan. I kept thinking Matt Smith.
Amazing. Yeah, no, so did I. And I was like, it's not Smith. It's not Smith. Yeah, it's Matt Ryan. He amazing job for that TV show.
Yeah, so he's very fantastic. So go watch that because that is literally how Young Justice got its new season, is people watching it on Netflix and tweeting about it. So,
is that really where Young Justice got its?
It's how it got re-greenlit, basically.
Nice.
Like the fans were so vocal and so avid, and the creators were so intent on bringing it back on social media that they finally capitulated and brought it back. So yeah.
Okay, so is there anybody else? There's no one else in the JSA. Or there are others.
Yeah, we did the Flash, but I mean, we've covered
Manhunter.
The core. We covered, Martian Manhunter is a cool character. Last survivor of Mars in most universes. Not in the Young Justice one, bizarrely, but usually one of the last people off Mars. It's just like Krypton. It's not. He's the last son of Mars, but not the last son of Mars. There's like 60 other ones that keep showing up. But yeah, and he tends to be, when he's written well, he tends to play the outsider very well, trying desperately to figure out how to interact with a race who
is not sure,
isn't his own and isn't very accepting. So he has a lot of very great story elements where he's just trying to live through that, right? Trying to find his place.
I forgot about Raven.
I don't know that Raven's been on the Justice League.
I don't think Raven's.
No.
I think she has, but Raven is a cool character. Raven is another character tied to demonology, and her father is basically one of the big bad demons of the universe, and she is stalwartly opposing his efforts.
Is Raven? Which one's Raven?
Defying. Raven's the Teen Titan.
Teen Titan. Okay. Okay.
She's Trigon's daughter.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's right. Okay. That's the original 7 of Justice League.
Yeah, that's most of the core members of the Justice League. The roster, obviously, if you list it all out, is huge.
Oh yeah, it's immense. What's up, Drew?
What's your favorite secondary character?
Like sidekick or kind of secondary even to that, like supporting.
Secondary character is a bad wording. Like not Justice League character, not Big Seven.
Not the big Justice League. Probably Dr. Fate.
In DC?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Fate's really high up there. Green Lantern or Green Arrow is really high up there.
Mm-hmm.
Robin is probably the real answer. Dick Grayson.
Everybody loves Robin, though, it seems.
I'm just glad that I can actually say Constantine now.
He actually had to
say that.
He actually had to work to get that because the old Batman TV show was very bad for Batman in a few ways, but the Robin aspect was particularly bad.
Golly gee, Batman, you don't say?
Yeah. So,
here, fun fact. Julie and I dressed up as Batman and Robin one year for Halloween.
Nice.
It was awesome. And it was like not Wally West. It was Adam West and I can't remember the other actor, Batman and Robin.
That show was very good and did a lot to increase the series, but trying to shift the comic books to more thematically match it was a mistake.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
What about you, Blue? What's your favorite not core?
Well, that's what I was saying is like I like the fact that Vertigo is now part of the DC world because now I can just say Constantine and be done with it. Because Hellblazer,
I guess if we're counting that,
God, Hellblazer
Death is pretty high up there.
Death is pretty high.
Delirium is pretty high up there.
Yeah,
and
you're talking about Sandman Death?
Yeah,
because that's Vertigo still, right?
They're part of the DC universe.
No, I know, but I mean, isn't Sandman Vertigo?
He was, yeah. That's
right. Okay,
for adding Vertigo.
Sandman
is part of the canon universe, actually.
Nice.
Really?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Death has a fascination with Lex Luthor. Actually, she's a Lex fanboy.
That's kind of adorable.
Yeah.
that
fangirl. Sorry. Yeah, she's very fascinated by him because he's so. I mean, he is one of the people you can put forth as a paragon of humanity's potential, as badly as he uses that.
Well, that's true, yeah. Okay, so Death is one of the endless, it says.
Yeah, Death is one of the endless. Delirium as well.
Yeah,
as is Morpheus or Dream.
Oh, Morpheus.
Morpheus is amazing. I love Morpheus. But yeah, Constantine.
I mean, he's a great character.
He's written well. He's written well. He's written well.
He's kind of a tool.
Yeah, he kind of is. But
he did get Lucifer started, which is
that's
which is one of my favorite things to ever happen.
Yeah,
here's the keys to hell. I'm out.
Have fun. Don't cause too much trouble. Constantine.
Don't mind the constant wars over the biggest piece of metaphysical real estate in the universe.
But yeah, like Hellblazer was just like a really I just remember reading that comic, and that was
Hellblazer was really good.
Oh my god, it was so good.
Definitely pushed the line.
Boundaries on
the comic.
But I mean that's Vertigo in general did that. Like Sandman, Sandman was, what was it? Gaiman?
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman.
But that was solidly after things started falling apart with the CCA and the
Vertigo. Yeah, because Sandman didn't really take off until fairly recent. It was not recent.
I mean, it took off at the beginning, but it became more mainstream.
Right.
A revival, so to speak.
Well, it also
modern
didn't
age.
Yeah. It was definitely a late bloomer, I think, as far as like its major, kind of like Watchmen did.
Yeah, because I was actually introduced to Sandman by Hellblazer because it was a Vertigo thing, and then obviously I stuck with Sandman even though it was really weird. The first thing is like
no, it was all really weird.
Well, I mean, right, but I mean, like the first, like okay, but going from Hellblazer, but like going from Hellblazer and like general comics to Sandman,
I'm just saying, don't say.
Oh no,
weird.
But you get a feel for it when you get a feel for the world of Sandman. It's kind of like, okay, this is just Gaiman's weirdness. Like, it's like Neverwhere.
It's just like Gaiman's weirdness. That's like walking into Mordor. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Anyway, they have a good point in chat. We should cover some of the villains, or at least sort of the general villain cosmology.
Yeah.
DC has a very weird thing. They have very stratted villains, in my opinion. They have a lot of villains that are above a certain line that are just catastrophic, world-ending, bad mamma jammas. And Darkseid and Brainiac, for those familiar, I'll go into those a little bit more in a minute. But they're just like Omega class villains that could just end the universe if they wanted to. And then below that, they have basically white collar and down villains.
Well,
there's no really big middle ground. I don't.
There isn't a lot.
I would argue that Joker's higher up than like, yes, granted, there's like God.
So like, I just
villains,
I would say
like
Joker's
why
like
we can you even say Joker's necessarily a villain, right? Like Joker's just don't bring him into most conversations because he's probably the most confusing and complicated character in comics history.
Right. Joker is not even a villain. Joker is an
Joker
idea.
could be a force of nature.
Right.
Like he
But
could
so
be like there's the storyline where he's actually super sane and realizes that he's in a comic book and thus nothing matters, and that's why he does what he does.
Right.
Like it's just impossible to like.
But like Darkseid, you could argue Darkseid is kind of not. Granted, Darkseid isn't necessarily insane, but you can argue
Darkseid is not insane at all.
You can like. Well, you can argue that Joker and Darkseid are similar in the fact that they're forces of nature. Is where I'm heading.
Kind of. The difference is that like I don't include Joker in most of my discussions of villains in DC because he doesn't fit the bill. Like he's just chaos almost.
He shoots Barbara Gordon.
No, that storyline didn't exist.
That storyline totally exists, and he's a jerk.
The storyline didn't exist.
It's like one of my favorite.
All that happened is like all that is some weird like flashback that you read on Wikipedia to make sense of of Gail Simone's divine and inspired.
So what about
Birds
Oracle?
of Prey?
Yeah, it's like Oracle.
Yeah, it's Oracle.
It's just crappy backlog for that.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it is. It's just a footnote in history. It doesn't exist. But I'm just saying. I'm just saying the Joker. No, the Killing Joke does not exist. You had points with me, Black Flag. Don't do this. Don't do this.
No.
What was the? I mean, talk about Joker problems.
So Joker's
what
like a
about
force of nature.
The Holiday comic. I can't remember what it was called. They like the killings on the holidays and.
So I mean, but again, it's hard to classify him as a villain because like what he does is so chaotic. Like no villain would do that, right? I mean, in most well-written Joker storylines, nobody works with him because like nobody would do what he does, right? And like the few that do, like Ra's al Ghul, when he employs him to distract Batman, like regret it so bad they break their 1,000-year-old oath to not let anybody else use their magic hot tub.
Right. But like
So,
the
like-
reason why you don't like Joker as a villain is the fact that Joker has no definable motive. Whereas most other villains, you can see what they're doing.
Yeah, but that's why I wouldn't call him a villain. And yeah, I mean, he's an antagonist. An antagonist is a better term for him because, like, to be a villain means a certain thing and a certain amount of intent. You can't even necessarily assign that to Joker because you don't know if he had any intent beyond what he's doing at the moment or if he had intent the whole time. It's too complicated to classify him in that way. I mean, he's almost more of a psychological phenomenon than even a character.
I like that. I was going to say that. I think I kind of agree with that. It's like you have like the heroes, you have the villains, and then in this like third random piece you have Joker. Like,
because I mean,
and the thing is that's what makes him so fascinating too.
And horrifying.
Like, well, no, I mean, but right.
So it's actually the real reason why I hate the Killing Joke is that reducing the Joker down to what he does in that storyline makes him less scary because that's a very human thing to do.
Right.
Like that's why it's bad. And like I actually think that's why the Red Hood and Death in the Family succeed so much better because like that. I think that I can't think of very many villains in the universe that would willingly take a Robin and beat them to death with a crowbar. Like most, I think even the harshest and hardest of hardened villains in the DC universe would be like, I'm not killing Batman's kid.
Well, it's not even that. Like, it's just like it's.
But that's what I'm saying. Like that's so bizarre. It's not even villainous anymore. Right,
but that's not necessarily something that is. Like not seen in our world.
But villains don't work in our world. Like realistically, but that's why that's another reason why he's scarier because he has more in common with people that exist.
Right.
We could run into on the street than comics. Right. He almost it breaks the fourth wall and deflates the fantasy escapism of comics.
But that's the whole point of having a piece of art. Is it's supposed to reflect?
I'm not saying he's a bad character. I'm just disputing that you can describe him as something as so simply as a villain. I think he's a brilliant character. I mean, I hate him and I loathe him, but I do think that describing him as a villain is a disservice to both him and to villains.
It's the semantics of it.
I mean, but I think it's an important distinction, because I think that putting Joker into that box also makes him less scary. Because again, it kind of assigns him understandable ideals and motives.
What I think Damo is saying is that the thing that makes Joker as potently powerful as he is the fact that he is not able to be defined. Like, he's not bound. So like when you say villains, right? Like when you talk about villains, you talk about people who have a set amount of goals. Like, Lex Luthor it's world domination. Brainiac is whatever Brainiac is. And like all these characters, they have a checklist, if you would, of like what they're doing, why they're doing it. Whereas the thing that
or at least they're just decipherably insane.
Right. But I mean, there's a definition. There's a definition of what is going on. But the thing with the Joker is that he's not really insane, but he's also completely not. Like he's in this like weird netherverse between sanity and insanity. And
if you have to argue about whether somebody is so super sane that they actually understand they're in a comic book and don't care what happens because they know they're in a comic book, or are legitimately just bat crap crazy insane, like that character is very difficult to define in any one way, to me at least.
But yes, so move to big super.
So Darkseid's another interesting character, and I want to actually bring up a quote that Ghost brought up. Give me a second. So Darkseid, some background. His whole point is to find this unifying anti-life equation that will basically, like, kind of varies, but it either will bring the whole universe into being one final point. See what I did there? Or to basically make himself the only aspect of the universe. But it's called the anti-life equation. And there's a great quote that he says to Superman, which is, "What will you do when your friends, your enemies, your lover are all Darkseid? When there is one body, one mind, one will, one life that is Darkseid. Will you be the enemy of all existence then?" And I think he's a fascinating villain. Because, like, he's, again, it's complicated to call him a villain. I mean, he definitely is, though. Darkseid is Oryx if a good writer had control of it. No, I'm kidding. Darkseid is Oryx if Oryx wasn't dumb, is actually better. But yeah, so he's an interesting character to me because he fundamentally believes that he is the apex of the universe and should therefore be the only aspect of it. I think that's kind of an interesting motivation.
And then, jumping from that to someone who's not necessarily as cosmic level, Lex Luthor's another really big.
I mean, Lex Luthor's kind of complicated in the ways that I prefer him written. He is less a villain and more just very, very fundamentally obsessed with humanity's potential, and very much distrusts and dislikes Superman because he tries in Lex's mind to control humanity's destiny, and also doesn't share his toys, so to speak.
That is a really good explanation of Lex, actually.
And he really fundamentally wants to control Superman, and that leads him to a lot of villainous things. Though I will say that he is also a very complicated villain because, like, in that storyline I was talking about earlier with the Justice Lords, like, Lex Luthor saves the day there, because he doesn't have any more interest in seeing his Earth conquered than anybody else does, right? That's his actual beef with Superman. Yeah, is that he fundamentally believes that you can't trust any one man with that power. So he has to either control or kill Superman. And in one of the best Superman stories of all time, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, he actually like ends up succeeding at eliminating Superman, spoilers, but regrets it like profoundly. Like at the end, he begins to understand what Superman really meant, and actually began to understand the true stuff of Superman, and what he was made of, basically, and understands, kind of like I did, because previously I hated Superman, and it clicked, which I thought was a very good story.
And then what else? Who else do we have?
Brainiac's kind of an interesting one. He believes that civilizations are doomed to mediocrity and awfulness, so he treks around the universe trapping them all. Either kind of literally by like stealing a city and sort of putting them in a bottle, or just basically taking a snapshot, downloading all of their data, recording everything that's going on, and then literally eliminating them.
And that's where, actually, to tie into video games, that's where what is it? DC on DC
Online, yeah, starts
I think
with
is Brainiac is attacking Earth.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's kind of an interesting villain too, in that like his motivations aren't traditional evil. He's just really sure that the universe is peaked and wants it all to stop before we ruin everything.
So what I keep hearing you say is that all the complex and just the good and bad guy.
DC actually, if you look at it, it's kind of weird because it's the opposite of Marvel. Marvel has very complicated heroes with a lot of weird motivations and a lot of ups and downs, and their villains tend to be less that. They tend to be very driven and very uncomplicated. There are definitely exceptions, and I wouldn't even say that that's the majority, but like the big ones, Apocalypse and Ultron and Galactus aren't particularly complicated in the motives department. They can be and have been, but they're not. Whereas DC's the opposite. Its heroes tend to be very one-dimensional is a disservice, but they tend to be very straightforward, very easy to understand. Yeah, Batman even is not that complicated of a character to understand. I mean, it can lead to a lot of complexity and a lot of interesting examination, but
the trigger for most of this tends to be like what makes them a superhero.
Yeah, and then they're not very complicated as a superhero. They tend to have very, very direct motivations. But the villains do tend to be much more complicated, or at the very least a twist on what you might think, right? Because like Darkseid very much has the control of the universe thing, but he's approaching it from a very different angle. And Lex is kind of the traditional like rich, powerful, arrogant, thinks he knows best villain, but for very different reasons and with very different results.
Right. Trying to think if there's any other like major. Oh God, I know Wonder Woman encounters them quite often with her storyline, just based on history. But talk about the old gods versus new gods and that little hook, because I know that was a thing that they talked about in chat a little bit.
Well, they were mentioning different new gods. Like there's kind of two weird god things. Because there's the Greek gods and some other pantheons that exist, and then there's the whole new gods versus the gods of Apocalypse, which is a whole different, very complicated thing that could have its own podcast, because Kirby doesn't do anything lightly.
Yeah.
But that is Jack Kirby's baby when he moved to DC.
Oh, Kirby.
But yeah, the gods are generally all villains to some extent, though some are less villains, because European gods were jerks. Just lay that out there.
That's pretty accurate, actually.
Is it just European gods, though? Cause
I mean, the European gods were special flavors of jerks. At at least a lot of the other pantheons had a little bit of variability, and they usually had. I mean, a Mediterranean can probably be lumped in with European because the Egyptians were pretty jerks too. But like Chinese and Japanese, which I'm fairly familiar with, ran the gamut a bit more.
They had
still fairly inscrutable, but there were definitely people who were like pro-human instead of people who were like pro-swan so that they could sleep with a human.
Mm-hmm. Or a bull.
Who was also a swaman, but then wasn't.
Yeah.
Or slept with his dad's horse to have a horse with 8 hooves.
Honestly, I think that should be
which
a topic.
I guess is what happens.
I guess. I think we should have a whole extra lore topic being mythology.
You probably want to either keep me far away from that one or keep me directly at it, depending on how much you want to laugh. Because I tend to have a very, very frank and direct approach to mythology, which is that it's fascinating.
But very
although my favorite one being described as a mythology often gets me in trouble, so I won't. But
horses with 8 hooves.
Yes, horses with 8 hooves. So many. My favorite mythology is Catholic, which I do separate from the religion because there is a lot of aspects of it that are very mythological and aren't even necessarily tied to the religion anymore. To put my disclaimer out there before I get in trouble.
Chat wants to know if we got invaded by horse people.
We did not get invaded by horse people.
Are you sure?
Centaurs are actually small planets.
Centaurs are actually... Oh, man. Let's see. So... Trying to think... Are there... I'm pretty bad with DC villains.
I think we've covered most of it. I mean, there's a lot of low tier and high tier and kind of crazy people, but like they're also often not as defined by their heroes. Go ahead, sorry, Green.
I mean, there's just so many Batman villains. Those are.
That's the thing is I'm overwhelmed thinking like I mean one of the primary ones is Raj, but I mean
again, kind of complicated. Is he really?
Is he really a villain? Is exactly what I was gonna say. Is like
well,
I mean you could.
I mean there are people you can point at that are definitely villains in the Batman universe, like Scarecrow, Two-Face, Penguin, not complicated. Like those are bad people doing bad things. Sure, their mental instability might drive them to it, and to some extent, maybe, but I mean, they're bad people who do bad things.
But then there's like characters like the Riddler, which literally all he wants to do is.
The Riddler is one of the characters that's got too many origins for you to 100% just point out.
Yeah.
Right. The Arnold character. Why can't I think of his name?
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze.
But he's also
the Arnold character. Don't do that.
That was my first exposure to it.
Don't do that to a wonderful and many-layered character like
I was about to say,
right?
He's another one that like if you look at his origin, it's again going back to what Damo was saying about.
Is he
DC.
really a villain?
Right, but I mean that's my point. Is like the villains in DC are like you start like. When you first get introduced to him, you're like, "Oh yeah, that's a bad person," blah, that's a villain, blah, blah. And then you like DC does a really good job of like peeling back the layers and saying, "No, this is why they're doing this." Like with Mr. Freeze, it's his whole thing with his wife.
Tons of villains in chat.
In chat, it's like,
are you trying to name villains that are just villains? Because Cheetah's, I guess, sort of a jerk all the time for no reason.
But no, Cheetah has a background. Cheetah was in the Rebirth series. She actually was the one who introduced Diana, Wonder Woman, into actually teaching her English.
Okay, well then never mind. No, you're wrong. Those are all complicated characters.
I mean, the Rogues Gallery. You can't even say the Rogues Gallery because the Rogues Gallery stands out from villains because they actually have a code of conduct.
Just got daddy issues.
Yeah,
I mean, off and on.
Except
when they like turned on those codes of values and Captain Cool put them all down like frickin' Man-Hour right there.
Parallax.
He's like flashes out of town. All right, I'll just take down the whole Rogues Gallery myself.
Because I can.
Because he's busy in the Speed Force.
Oh man. But
yeah, I'll grant you Parallax is probably just unfiltered evil, but he is also Hal Jordan, so like that explains a little bit of it. Doesn't Necron have some like super complicated reason for how he got screwed over? And no, Deathstroke's not even a villain. Deathstroke just want to get paid.
Yeah.
Man,
he's
want to get paid.
He's a complete mercenary. Love Deathstroke. He's not
closer
even
to being a villain in the Arrowverse, and he's kind of complicated there too.
Well, and that's just because they messed up
Deathstroke has
his
no
story.
morals, but I still don't know if you'd call him a villain. Like he just really wants to get paid. At some points, that is definitely by killing everybody around him. But
did we ever get an explanation about Necron?
I was not a huge fan of that storyline, so if somebody else wants to, they can. But
I liked that storyline, but I don't know his background. Like, I don't know what happened before it because I jumped right into the actual major arc.
I just remember it was like complicated. He wasn't always evil. Something happened to him to turn him so crazed and death obsessed.
Yeah. Oh, what about Hawkman and Hawkgirl? Talk about. I mean, they're not villains, but they're talk about.
I mean, which version?
Yeah.
Which of like 16 different versions?
Yes.
Most of which are variants on the first two, which are aliens or Egyptians, but sometimes both, but sometimes neither.
I love the ones that are both, but also both, because it always comes back to both.
I like the Egyptian one.
I do too.
Right, but even the Egyptian one has aliens in it.
Sometimes.
Well, that's
when it's both, but also neither, but also both, back again. Like, you gotta understand DNA sequencing to understand the frickin' Hawks backstories. Like, which strain of Hawkism are we working with here?
Oh, man.
Man.
Yeah, Necron that's a Green Lantern, right?
Yeah, he's the Black Lantern Corps.
Black Lantern, that's right.
Basically.
Okay.
He's the one who made everybody a zombie.
Oh, okay,
Almost.
That's right. Yeah.
Almost.
Well, Batman's the first one that he raises after the death of Batman, right?
Yeah.
Or was other Batman, or it was one of the major, and he raises him up, gives him a black ring, because you have to be dead to wear the Black Lantern ring, and then he controls all of them essentially.
That's Blackest Night. The Blackest Night story. Okay.
And then the weird one, Brightest Day, with all the different colored lanterns. Although I really like the Lantern Corps idea with all the emotions and the psychological aspects. But
that's how we know.
From the
that's
two Green Lanterns that people keep talking about but don't actually exist. They're a really cool story. It's just really weird that people keep mentioning those people that don't exist. Or they call Guy Gardner a Green Lantern? What's up with that? That dude's wearing red, guys. Wearing red. Fits much better.
It fits much better. That's where we got the joke about the Night Stalkers.
Always a red.
Just because he had red hair does not mean...
No, he is literally a Red Lantern.
I know he is now.
And always should have been.
It always should have been.
One of the other great moments in Justice League in that episode is where they're talking about recruiting people to the Justice League, and they're like, Earth has a third Green Lantern. What about Guy? And both John and Hal are like, no! Slam down their hands on the table. Just like 100% throw in the shade, don't even care.
Oh, man.
Alright, I should be winding down.
Oh, yeah, it's because I'm trying to think what... I think that's pretty much a good touch point, at least, for like the major figures and the major aspects.
And it gets us some of the thematic elements of DC, which I think are the important parts.
Yeah, I think that was like going into it. That was what I was definitely interested in, is, kind of what we talked about with like the differences between heroes and villains in DC as compared to Marvel, and like the mirror presentation of that. Green, did you have?
I would say one last question just to kind of give people a touchstone to jump off of if they've never read the comics. What comic would you suggest, or what storyline would you suggest somebody read?
Like
wow.
to start,
Okay,
to
that's
start
tough.
off. Yeah,
I'm gonna give a couple because I don't know of any super great definitive Justice League runs. If somebody wants to put that in chat, I'll toss it out when I get to the end of mine. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way is probably one of the best Superman stories. All-Star Superman is fantastic. If you're looking for a twist, Superman Red Sun, SON, is very good too. I will mention the death of Superman because everybody else in the world likes it. I would actually say Penn's has a very good point. If you really want to get familiar with the DC universe in a way that's pretty comprehensive, and you have a little bit of time, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, which is a continuation of Justice League, are on Netflix. That is one of the best ways to see the DC universe. The Superman and Batman animated shows are on Amazon. I don't know why it's separated. Those are also very good, but I think that they're a little more narrowly focused on those characters, and in some cases actually misrepresent them a little bit to make them better for TV. But they're good. If you want something that kind of captures the theme in a weird way, but is almost satirical, but not really, is the original Teen Titans show by Cartoon Network is very fantastic. It's much lighter, and it kind of eschews a lot of the elements of comics to tell a much lighter and kid-friendly story, but does so in a way that retains almost all of the thematic elements that make Teen Titans Teen Titans. And then Young Justice is actually an incredible look into the DC universe. I'll mention Nightfall. Nightfall's pretty good. I'm not mentioning He Who Shall Not Be Named's worked. I'm sorry, Ghost.
We nearly got it. We nearly got it.
You got a freaking advocate for him in the channel, in the chat. You can bring him up. You can bring him up if you want, because you know what's going to happen if you do, and we're not going to finish anytime soon, and we're not going to be able to publish any of it at all. At all. If we could be started on that particular man and his, air quotes, contributions to the DC universe.
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't, like, for me, like I said, I kind of read the, kind of, like, the, I mean, I got really started with Vertigo comics, so, I mean, I'm kind of, like, DC, Vertigo is now as part of the DC canon, but it definitely is not, like, the best way to get introduced to DC, because, honestly, it really didn't have a lot. I don't know how, have they been, or are they part of the new, what is it, the new 52?
They've been part for a long time.
Well, I mean, but are they getting reborn as part of the whole thing?
I mean, the thing just kind of changed elements of the DC universe. It wasn't quite like the old events.
They're also not doing as many. There's not as many crossovers as there.
Yeah. Hurt Chain, I never watched that. It got canceled at the same time as Young Justice, and I was so angry at Cartoon Network. I never went back and watched the Green Lantern show.
Wasn't that one voiced by Nathan Fillion?
I don't think that one was, but he has done a lot of Green Lantern work. It's his favorite comic character.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Blue, what do you think?
Well, and Damo, close your ears, because
no, if you mention it, the fight happens.
This is why I'm just not answering any questions.
Right. No. Like, so
I
will give you that, like, Grant Morrison does a really good job with like Superman, and I still need to read All-Star. But one of the big things, if you're a big fan of like really gritty comics, a author that you probably heard, and you have to be careful, and Damo and I will agree on this one, because he has ones that are very well or very okay, and then there are ones that are just terrible. and that's Frank Miller. Frank Miller has always kind of pushed the edge as far as like the darker sides of these comics. You probably recognize him from like Watchmen and from the 300. And so he's kind of got one of those.
With regards to the Watchmen, do you perhaps mean the actual author, Alan Moore?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. God, man, I completely
was a little
forgot.
confused there.
Since that man can write his way out of a paper bag.
Yeah, but
I would agree with that. It would be his redeeming element, Pens, if he didn't drop the ball on Catwoman pretty hard.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is like Miller has like you have to read Miller with like an understanding of Miller.
I will grant him that he definitely helped DC during a difficult time,
right.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And
the end.
Miller writes some of the darkest Joker stuff, I think.
Well, yeah, he also writes some of the darkest Batman stuff.
Oh, he doesn't write Batman. That's not Batman.
Well, yeah, again. He has a different.
At the very least, that's an alternate universe Batman.
Right. Oh God, especially the recent ones, but like, or the more recent writing ones. Like, it's just, yeah, don't read early Miller, because it's got the darker aspects of where they were, and then Morrison does a really good job in kind of like humanizing and kind of giving a more rounded picture, I think, of them. Sometimes I think Morrison gets a little too idealistic with Batman's character, but at the same time, that's like having Miller write something for Superman. It's just they're two different worlds trying to cross, and it's not going to work.
Well, the difference there is a little bit that Miller hates Superman.
Right, and that's kind of I think sometimes I get the feeling with Morrison about that with Batman every now and then, but I mean Miller is definitely a lot more transparent Morrison, about his hatred towards Superman.
I think Morrison just likes a very different Batman. It's a little bit different, but
I think I would definitely agree with Pence and chat that Miller's Batman Year One was well done.
I think it was okay. I think it's a decent representation of Batman. I actually think the character he nails is Gordon.
Right, and his supporting characters, that's where he kind of drops the ball, which Damo kind of mentioned, like with Catwoman. He focuses a lot on Batman and like the direct supporting characters, like Gordon. Gordon was amazing, but like the world, I don't know. He kind of it kind of gets gray washed.
Is a misogynist?
Yeah, I mean, literally. I mean, like he's Pence is in there. Like Morrison is more the detective Batman, and Miller is the brutal. Like Miller is the one that Batman goes off and.
I read an interesting thing that said that like Miller is the villains of Gotham City's on Joker or Scarecrow toxin.
Oh gosh, that is actually a really good point. I'd agree with that. Yeah. So that again, that is the only way that he works in my head is that version of Batman is what I can see that. But I guess it also points to the fact that like comics, the other thing that you have to remember with comics is that every single issue that you pick up could be potentially penned by someone different, and they have their own approach, they have their own interpretation. I mean, and you see, and Miller is just someone that we kind of pick on because it's really easy to see. I mean, if you hold a Miller comic up to like a Miller story about Batman up to a Miller story about Superman, it's going to be very different, even the same person. Now, if you hold a Miller story about Superman up against a Morrison comic about Superman, you're going to see you see the biases of those authors very, very clearly. And the reason why those two always get held up to each other is, first off, if I remember right, they really don't like each other. And then
probably not.
I'm almost certain they don't. But I mean, but their writing styles are nearly polar opposites. And it's just those are two that are constantly held in because Miller is predominantly more Batman, Morrison was predominantly more Superman, so that's kind of the natural clash there that's always been in the DC universe is Batman versus Superman. And so but that's it. It really shows the bias of the author. And with comics, the reason why that's a big deal is because you have to remember that comics are really short. Like the issues, you will have like technically a story arc, and generally your story arcs will be the same author, but there are some comics that the same story arc. I mean, I'm thinking I'm more familiar with Marvel as far as this part, but like, I mean, Civil War was one story arc. It was not my favorite one, but there was a lot of different authors in it, and you could see the change in the writing style throughout that arc. And
yeah, for sure.
Like, and I mean, like, yeah, in like the ending, but anyways, we'll get into that next month. But like, that's just something for me that it also depends. Just, and I say all this because if you pick up one of the comics or one of the series that Damo mentioned, and you're not a fan of it, that doesn't mean stop by any means, because you can keep reading that same character, and if you have a different author come in, they could present that same character completely different. And it could be someone that, is more in line with what you're saying. And that's both the beauty and the curse of comic books, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's why, like, I'm saying, like, I kind of got into comics through the Vertigo comics and through like more like at the time the independent comics, the grittier comics that didn't really follow that. And so, like, when I'm talking about comics, I'm kind of talking about that aspect. I never really got into like the core DC, other than kind of dabbling in Batman, and mostly because that was what Miller. I was reading some of Miller's stuff. I've always kind of been more of the like Sandman, Hellblazer, and all those. So that's kind of. I really appreciate those story arcs, and I think they're amazing. But as far as introduction,
I think in a lot
DC,
I think in a lot of other cases, I enjoy them too. Like, they're definitely dark and gritty storylines that I've particularly enjoyed. But there are other things that keep me from liking those. Because I mean, I like Hellblazer a lot too. I'm a big Sandman fan.
But it's
most of the early Claremont stuff in X-Men I adore.
Right.
Right. But like, I just, yeah, there are other elements to him that.
Right. So I mean, and so yeah, that's my Green. I know, Green. You did a lot of reading of, I think it was Golden Age, didn't you?
I have most of the Wonder Woman Golden Age run, yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
But as far as like what my favorite would be, is I would actually, my first introduction to an event was Blackest Night, Brightest Day, which is a terrible introduction. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand the reason why the event is happening while it's happening, because there's no context whatsoever in the event, unless you're reading all the different titles, which I was poor in college when that event happened, and that wasn't going to happen.
Even if you weren't poor, you had to be pretty high up there in the finances to be able to afford all the books in that storyline.
But as far as an introduction to the different characters, don't do the movies. That's my suggestion.
Man of Steel is a pretty decent Superman story. The other ones have potential. Well, I mean, Wonder Woman's great.
Right, but like, to get a feel for comics, the movies are
they're definitely different. No, absolutely. They're definitely different. Like, if you want to know the characters for sure, that's fine. But yeah, if you're trying to experience the comics, they're very different beasts.
Right. Definitely don't watch Green Lantern.
It wasn't that bad.
Break that disc in half.
It wasn't that bad.
It was
It's not
terrible.
like it was Spider-Man 3.
It was okay. I give
the
you
musical.
That, but it was
the musical.
The movie without Spider-Man.
It was still terrible.
I mean, it wasn't as bad as X-Men 3. Arguably, it wasn't even as bad as X-Men 1, which had some good stuff and gets away with a lot because it was early. But I mean, come on, what happens when you hit a toad with lightning? Like, really? Like, with a straight line, Halle Berry with a straight face.
As far as
How
movies,
did you manage that?
Movies go, DC has not really hit it out of the park.
I think Man of Steel is pretty strong, but they're also very early.
But Man is like, if as far as like the early ones, I'm thinking, oh gosh, what was his name? Like, my very first introduction to Superman was the Superman movies from like the 80s.
Those were a very good representation of I mean, one Superman. There's kind of few different ones, but they were very good.
And then my next introduction to comic book characters was the Batman terrible George Clooney version,
which is one of the most awful films ever to be made.
It was really weird. That's all I have to say. But if you want a good introduction, I would say go into your local comic book shop and ask somebody behind the desk, because they're going to direct you in a way that I can't. Or even better, if you like podcasts like our Focus Fire Chat podcast, if you're listening to Focus Fire Chat podcast, I imagine you like podcasts. So why don't you head on over to the, oh gosh, now I after that big roll up, I can't remember the name of the podcast. Geek History Lesson. Yeah. They do a podcast every week about a different character or comic book universe, and they give you, this is the one I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, they give you a pretty good rundown of the background and where they're from the Golden Age, and things that you need to know about the character, which is honestly where the majority of my comic book knowledge comes from. So that's my suggestion. If you like podcasts, go there.
Good. Damo, you have any last shout outs?
Just the Focus Fire crew. They did a fantastic job, and you're going to have a treat that'll take you a few hours to devour when you look at the mind map for this one.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, also Pens, yeah. I mean, if you hated somebody, you could show them Christian Bale's Batman movies.
All the fights tonight.
No, I mean, they were pretty good. The second one is too horrifying of a movie for me to ever rewatch, but I mean that in a complimentary way. That is definitely the most terrifying depiction of Joker I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I actually liked Catwoman in 3 too. I think that there were a lot of people that tried really hard to make that third movie work, and none of them could manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one was okay, but I think it's not as good as most people think it is, in my opinion.
Considering what its predecessor was, it did not have a high.
No, but I mean, I'm not grading on a curve anymore. Like I'm trying to evaluate movies as they stand. So
yeah.
Well, our next topic, as we said at the beginning of the episode, is going to be on the Marvel universe. So we'll be doing probably another conversation similar to this one next month on that. And I think that's really it. We appreciate everyone sticking through it in the live chat, and all you guys are killing me with all the comments that we're getting over there. That's really good. I'm glad to see it. But yeah, let's run through outro. We can stick around for a little bit of an after show. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on www.focusfirechat.com. Thank you again, Damo, for jumping into the chat. We really appreciate having you, and I'll be sure to get links to you up in our show notes for anyone who wants to continue chatting with you. Please be sure to also email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any feedback or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback on iTunes. Reminder that we do try to stream a recap of the month-long Extra Lore conversations in the first week of each month. However, if we have any variations, we will always make sure to let everyone know through our Twitter account at FocusFireChat. Also, be sure to check out our partner podcast within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So, until next time, focus your fire, and may your light shine bright.